Hello, I'm Eliana from Flow, and today I'll be covering how requesting works in ComCat. One very important thing to understand about requesting in ComCat is the lender list building process. When you go to request an item in ComCat, you may be looking at the record from a specific network or library, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll ultimately receive that copy of the item. Every time you place a request in ComCat, a process runs in the background that searches all resources for items matching that record. In the example here, we're requesting a collection of poetry from a UMass Dartmouth record, but the list of potential lenders includes Helm, MBLN, and UMass Amherst libraries. It doesn't matter where you initiate a request, ComCat will find as many potential lenders as possible based on the record. The request form that patrons see is slightly different from the one staff see. The major difference between the forms is the notes field. Patrons have what's called a patron's note, which is only viewable by the borrowing library, not the lending library. The staff request form, on the other hand, has a borrower's note field. This field can be seen by both the borrowing and lending library. If a patron-initiated request has a note in it that's relevant to the lender, the borrowing library will need to copy and paste this note into the borrower's note field so that the lender can see it. Although some library staff log in as patrons to place requests on their behalf, it's strongly recommended that you place requests for patrons from your staff account. Not only is this more efficient because you have one login for all requesting, but the staff account has more privileges than a patron level account. While requesting as staff, you have the aforementioned borrower's note field that lets you communicate with the lender. You also have permission to override duplicate requests and requests that are restricted because the item is owned in your network. If a patron attempts to request an item owned by your network, a pop-up will appear suggesting that they request the item from their local OPAC. Clicking yes on this pop-up will take them directly to the item record in your OPAC so they can place a hold there. As mentioned before, staff can override this feature if the item owned by your network is unacceptable. If your network owns the item but all copies are checked out, the pop-up won't appear and ComCat will allow the patron to request it. I'm going to briefly show you what requesting actually looks like. Depending on how items are clustered, there are some that you can request directly from the results screen. To do so, you're going to click on the hand icon to bring up the request form. This request button looks a little different on the full record display. In the full record display, it appears as a larger button with the text "Request this item" on it. Clicking on either request button will bring up the patron lookup screen if you're logged in as staff. There are two kinds of patron lookup: a share it lookup for patrons who already have ComCat accounts, and an ILS lookup for those who don't. Share it is the generic name for ComCat, and ILS refers to your library system. To use the share it lookup, all you need to do is type in part of the patron's name or their barcode. You then select the patron you want to open up the request form. Most of the time, you won't need to do anything to this form unless you need to qualify the request with the borrower's note. The autofill typically takes care of everything you need. When you've confirmed that everything is correct, you can press the Submit button to send the request to its first lender. This concludes the video on requesting items in ComCat. If you experience any issues with requesting, please submit a ticket to the help desk or email us at comcat@flow.libanswers.com. Thank you for listening.